All right, today in geometry, we're going to look at section 8.5, properties of trapezoids and kites. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral with exactly one pair, right, of parallel sides. Parallel sides are called the bases. So in this picture, up here, down here, those are my two bases. Those are my parallel. It has so the parallel sides are referred to as the bases. It will then have two pairs of base angles. So base angle, base angle, base angle, base angle. The non-parallel sides are referred to as the legs. Then we're going to talk about a special type of trapezoid. This is called an isosceles trapezoid. An isosceles trapezoid is a trapezoid whose legs are congruent, because remember that isosceles means it has two congruent legs. So isosceles trapezoid, same thing as isosceles trapezoid, or sorry, triangle, you still will have two legs that are congruent. So here in an isosceles trapezoid, I know that AB is parallel to DC, and I know that AD is congruent to BC. So we're going to talk about the properties of an isosceles trapezoid. If a trapezoid is isosceles, then each pair of base angles are congruent. So angle A is congruent to angle B. They both sit on the same base. Angle C is congruent to angle D because they both sit on the same base. If a trapezoid has a pair of congruent base angles, then it is an isosceles trapezoid. So if I know that angle C and angle D are congruent, then I automatically know that AD is congruent to BC. A trapezoid is isosceles if and only if its diagonals are congruent. So AC would have to be congruent to BD in an isosceles trapezoid. So now we're going to talk about the trapezoid midsegment theorem. The midsegment of a trapezoid is parallel to each base, and its length is 1/2 the sum of the lengths of the bases. Remember, midsegment means segment halfway between. Okay? So it says that the midsegment of the trapezoid is parallel to each base. So here my midsegment is XY. So XY is parallel to each base. It's parallel to AB, and XY is parallel to base DC. And its length, so XY is equal to 1/2 the sum of the lengths of the bases. So AB plus DC. So now we're going to talk about a kite. A kite is a quadrilateral with exactly two pairs of congruent consecutive sides, or we might also call those sides adjacent, one right after the other, but whose opposite sides are not congruent. So in this picture, AB is congruent to AD. They are adjacent. However, AD is opposite BC, so AD and BC are not congruent. So then BC would be congruent to DC. So these are my two adjacent that are congruent on this side. The two opposite from them are congruent to each other, but not to the ones opposite them. So let's talk about some properties of kites. If a quadrilateral is a kite, then its diagonals are perpendicular. So AC perpendicular to BD. So again, I know that all four of those angles inside my kite there are going to be 90 degrees. One more property of a kite. If a quadrilateral is a kite, then exactly one pair of opposite angles are congruent. And it matters which pair those are. So it's angle B is congruent to angle D. Okay? It will be the pair that's in between, so the angle in between the non-congruent sides. Okay? So these sides are not congruent to each other, so that angle and the angle across from it will be congruent. Now we're going to look at some examples of kites and trapezoids. Number one, it tells me DEFG is an isosceles trapezoid. The measure of angle DEF, so DEF, okay, so this entire angle is 108. D to F, this entire diagonal is 21. AE, that little part of it up there is 7. Find the following. Okay. Again, we are going to go ahead and label everything that we know. Okay. I know in a isosceles trapezoid, remember, that our diagonals are congruent. So if the top of this one is 7, the top of this one is 7. If the entire thing is 21, so 21 minus 7 leaves me with 14. So I know that this part is 14 and this part is 14. I know that my base angles are congruent. So if angle E is 108, angle D is also 108 degrees. Okay? So now let's go ahead and see what are they asking me to find. Number one, G to E. Well, G to E is 14 plus 7, 21. AD, we have that labeled 7. GA, we have that labeled 14. Number 4, the measure of angle EDG. EDG, we have that labeled 108 degrees. Great, so now we're going to find the measure of angle DGF. So DGF, so that's this entire angle down here. Okay. Remember that this is a quadrilateral, so all 4 angles have to add up to equal 360. Okay. I know that this is a base, so G and F have to be the same. So 360 minus 108 minus 108. So minus my 2 top face angles. That gives me 144. So these two together have to be 144, but they have to also be the same because they are base angles. So 144 divided by 2 gets me 72 degrees. So I know the angle DGF is 72 degrees. And then the other one is angle EFG. EFG, that's my other base angle, 72 degrees as well. Let's look at our next page. So it tells me if AB is a midsegment of trapezoid QRST, find QR. Remember that our formula, okay, the midsegment is half base 1 plus base 2. So my midsegment, they tell me, is 52, equals 1/2. My top base, that's X, that's what I'm looking for, X plus bottom base, 68. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this 1/2. So to get rid of that 1/2, I'm going to multiply everything by 2. What I do to one side, I have to do the other side. So now I have 104 equals X plus 68. Subtract 68 from both sides, so I get X equals 36. So then QR is equal to 36. Our next example, in the kite, find the measure of angle A and the measure of angle D. Okay. Remember that my opposite angles in a kite, okay, I have one pair of opposite angles that are congruent, and those are the angles that are between the 2 non-congruent sides. So I know right off the bat angle A is 117 degrees as well. Kite is still a quadrilateral, so they still all 4 have to add up to equal 360. So 360 minus 117 minus 117 minus 51 is going to give me angle D. So then I find that the measure of angle D is equal to 75 degrees. The next one, find all the side lengths of the kite. Okay? So they give me that this diagonal, top and bottom are both 3, this diagonal 7 and a 10. Remember that I know all of these are right angles. So if I wanted to find the side length, X, okay, so I know that this one is going to be X, this one is going to be Y, I'll call it. So if I pull out this first triangle, 3, 7x. Pythagorean theorem. Okay. So I have 3 squared plus 7 squared equals x squared. So 9 plus 49 equals x squared. So I get 58 is equal to x squared. But I don't want x squared, so I'm going to take the square root of 58. This did not specify perfect square or, I'm sorry, simplified radical or decimal, so I'm going to go ahead and do a decimal. So the square root of 58 is approximately 7.6. So this is approximately 7.6. So I could say, let's see over here, so BC is approximately 7.6 and DC is approximately 7.6. So now I'm going to do this other triangle. So this one, 3, 10, and y. So again, I'm still going to do Pythagorean theorem. So 3 squared plus 10 squared equals y squared. So 9 plus 100 equals y squared. 109 equals y squared. Take the square root of both sides. Again, type that in my calculator, and I get approximately 10.4. So I know then that AB is approximately 10.4, and AD is approximately 10.4. So those are my side lengths. All right, last page has all of our pictures. Okay. A trapezoid has 1 pair of parallel sides. The median of the trapezoid is parallel to the bases and half the sum of the bases. An isosceles trapezoid has 1 pair of parallel sides. Its legs are congruent. Its base angles are congruent. Its diagonals are congruent, and its opposite angles are supplementary. A kite has 2 distinct pairs of adjacent sides congruent. Diagonals are perpendicular. 1 pair of opposite angles congruent. 1 diagonal creates 2 isosceles triangles. 1 diagonal creates 2 congruent triangles. 1 diagonal bisects the angles. 1 diagonal bisects the other. The quadrilateral family. Okay? Quadrilateral. A kite is a quadrilateral. A parallelogram is a quadrilateral. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral. Isosceles trapezoid, rectangle, square, rhombus, they are all quadrilaterals. Okay? A parallelogram, a rhombus, a square, a rectangle are all parallelograms. Remember that a rhombus, okay, a square is a rhombus, a square is a rectangle. Some rectangles are squares, some rhombuses are squares. A trapezoid can be an isosceles trapezoid. Isosceles trapezoid can be a rectangle. All right, so that is 8.5 trapezoids and kites. Your homework will be the 8.5 worksheet over trapezoids and kites.